All right, so today we're going to dive deep into the world of a guy who redefined how we understand, well, pretty much everything. Isaac Newton.
A pretty monumental figure, that's for sure.
We're using excerpts from a biography of his life for this deep dive. And trust me, you'll see there was so much more to him than just gravity, apples, and, that whole thing.
Yeah, much more.
We're talking alchemy, biblical prophecy.
Even a bit of crime fighting.
Exactly, yeah.
A fascinating mix of contradictions. Brilliant scientist, but also, deeply spiritual, obsessed with the mystical alongside the mathematical.
It's kind of wild, right? Okay, so to really get him, I think we got to start back in 1642.
Okay.
Christmas Day, actually.
Oh, wow.
When a tiny, premature Newton entered the world. Didn't think he would survive.
Really?
But talk about defying the odds from day one.
Yeah, he did that a few times, didn't he?
Right. And his childhood, it did not get any easier. Father died before he was born, then his mother left him to be raised by his grandparents.
It makes you wonder how much early hardship shapes a person, I'm always just fascinated by that.
For sure. But here's the thing. Newton wasn't some, child prodigy instantly spouting theories.
Right.
In fact, he was often described as idle and inattentive.
Really?
Which is not exactly what you'd expect from the guy who revolutionized physics, right?
True.
Yeah.
But beneath the surface, something was definitely brewing. This idle kid was building these intricate models. Windmills powered by mice, detailed sundials. Clearly, he was fascinated by how things worked, even then.
That fascination just exploded when he got to Trinity College, Cambridge in 1661. Suddenly, he's surrounded by all these, leading thinkers, Descartes, Galileo.
Wow.
Their ideas were like the air he breathed.
Yeah. And he wasn't just, passively absorbing it all. He was picking those ideas apart.
Yeah.
Challenging them, trying to figure out the mechanisms underneath. That drive to innovate,
Yeah.
That was core to him from the very beginning.
Yeah, and then, boom, 1665, the plague hits. Cambridge shuts down. So Newton heads back to the family farm.
Okay.
And you'd think that would stall his progress, right?
You would think.
But this period of forced isolation became his Annus Mirabilis, his year of wonders.
His year of wonders. What?
It's like being away from that academic hub just supercharged his thinking.
Isolation can do that sometimes, can't it? Forces you to rely on your own resources, your own intuition. While everyone else was focused on just, surviving, Newton's over there inventing calculus, cracking the laws of motion, and, starting to grapple with this whole concept of gravity.
Okay, so this is where the famous apple story comes in, right?
Ah, yes.
I've always wondered how much of that was myth versus reality.
Well, whether an apple actually, bunked him on the head is debatable, I think. The point is that it triggered a realization. That same force pulling the apple down was also holding the moon in orbit around the Earth. So this seemingly simple observation led to this profound shift in our understanding of the universe.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it that way. Before Newton, people didn't connect those two things. Earthly forces and, the movements of celestial bodies.
Yeah.
What did they think that the heavens worked by, magic or something?
Exactly. It was all this sense of mystery and the supernatural surrounding the cosmos, Newton brought it all down to earth, basically, showing that the universe operates according to these consistent, understandable laws.
And then, of course, he went on to define those laws.
He did, yes.
Those famous laws of motion. I remember learning about them in school, but honestly, I think they went in one ear and out the other.
It happens. Happens to the best of us.
I think you can maybe refresh my memory a little.
Absolutely. They're deceptively simple, but incredibly powerful. The first law states that an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion at the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force.
Okay, that makes sense. So, a hockey puck gliding on ice will just keep going in a straight line unless it, hits something or friction slows it down.
Precisely. Now, the second law gets a bit more into the math, but basically it says that the force acting on an object is equal to its mass times its acceleration. The more force you apply, the faster it accelerates. But heavier objects require more force to achieve the same acceleration.
Okay, so pushing a shopping cart with more force is going to make it go faster.
Right.
But a loaded cart, one that's, full of groceries, needs even more oomph to speed up.
You got it. Now, the third law is my favorite. It states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Like jumping off a diving board, right?
That's exactly.
You push down on the board and it springs you up.
Exactly. And that same principle applies to everything from rocket propulsion, the hot gases pushing down propel the rocket up to the simple act of walking.
It's amazing. So these laws aren't just like some abstract theories. They're literally governing every movement we make.
Absolutely. Newton's genius was in seeing those fundamental principles at play in both the, I guess you could say, mundane and the magnificent.
Oh.
From a rolling ball to the planets orbiting the sun.
So, okay, but he didn't stop there, right?
No.
He took these earthly laws and applied them to, like, the entire cosmos.
He did.
That's where his magnum opus, Principia Mathematica comes in.
Right, published in 1687. This book, it was groundbreaking. I mean, Newton unified the heavens and the earth, showing that the same laws of motion and gravity apply everywhere in the universe. Imagine how radical that was at the time.
It's hard to even wrap my head around that. It's like he took this chaotic, mysterious universe and like imposed order on it.
Oh, yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting, right? Because Newton wasn't just this like cold, calculating scientist.
Right.
He was also deeply into alchemy, biblical prophecies, all this mystical stuff.
Yeah, and that's what makes him so intriguing. Remember, back then, the lines between science and mysticism were much blurrier.
Okay.
To Newton, these pursuits weren't contradictory. They were just different ways of seeking the same ultimate truths.
So he was basically trying to decode the universe, whether it was through like scientific observation or through deciphering hidden messages in the Bible.
Yeah, a man of insatiable curiosity, driven by this deep need to understand the underlying mechanisms of the universe,
Yeah.
both the seen and the unseen. But let's not forget that he was also a complex, sometimes difficult individual,
Right.
prone to fuse and fiercely protective of his ideas.
Like his famous rivalry with Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, right?
Yes.
Didn't they both independently come up with calculus?
They did, yeah, and it led to one of the most bitter disputes in scientific history.
Wait, so two brilliant minds on opposite sides of Europe basically have the same breakthrough at the same time.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
But tell me more about this feud. How did this all play out?
Well, it gets messy. Leibniz published his work first,
Uh-huh.
and Newton, who'd been developing his own version for years but hadn't published, he accused Leibniz of plagiarism.
Wow. And what's even crazier is that Newton ended up chairing the committee that was investigating the dispute.
He did, yeah.
Talk about a conflict of interest.
It was a power move, for sure.
Yeah.
And unsurprisingly, the committee sided with Newton. But, to be fair to Leibniz, both men contributed significantly to the development of calculus.
Right.
It's a testament to the intellectual ferment of that era that such a groundbreaking concept could emerge from multiple minds almost simultaneously.
Okay, so it was a scientific brawl, but ultimately, math benefited.
Right.
I guess that's a win for humanity. But hold on, Newton's story takes another wild turn, right?
It does, yeah.
He goes from decoding the universe to, wait for it, running the Royal Mint.
That's right.
Like what?
It might seem like a strange transition, but remember, Newton was all about order, precision systems. Counterfeiting was rampant in England at the time, and he saw it as both a threat to the nation and an intellectual puzzle to solve.
So he basically applied that scientific rigor to tracking down counterfeiters. It's like Sherlock Holmes with a powdered wig.
Exactly. He went undercover, gathered informants, meticulously analyzed counterfeit coins to understand their techniques. He wasn't just sitting behind a desk. He was out there in the field, actively involved in the investigations.
It's hard to picture this brilliant scientist like grilling suspects in a dimly lit room.
I know, right?
But I guess it shows his dedication to any task he set his mind to.
Absolutely. And his work at the Mint had a huge impact. He helped reform the English currency, stabilizing the economy, establishing a foundation for modern finance. Who knew Newton was such an economic powerhouse?
This is blowing my mind.
Right.
From apples to calculus to crime fighting to currency reform.
The guy did it all.
This guy did it all. But amidst all those achievements, he was also a deeply complex and even contradictory figure.
Absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface of his personality and legacy.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the contradictions of Isaac Newton. The brilliant mind, the prickly personality, and the lasting impact that continues to shape our world today. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've seen Newton, the scientist, the mathematician, the crime fighter, but what about the person? The guy behind all these incredible feats?
Yeah, he was notoriously prickly, that's for sure, prone to feuds, incredibly protective of his ideas, a perfectionist to an almost debilitating degree.
I read that he hesitated to publish his work for years, terrified of being wrong. Imagine that.
It
You revolutionized physics, but you're still, like, second-guessing yourself. Dude, you invented calculus. Give yourself some credit.
It's almost paradoxical. This man who unlocked so many secrets of the universe was also plagued by self-doubt.
Yeah.
And his writing reflects that. It's dense, complex, packed with formulas, very little plain language explanation. It's almost like he was writing for an audience of, well, Isaac Newton. Maybe he thought everyone else was as brilliant as him. But even without being, the most accessible writer, his work did earn him widespread recognition.
Oh, absolutely. Knighted by Queen Anne in 1705, becoming Sir Isaac Newton. That's the ultimate stamp of approval, a testament to his impact on science and society.
So he reaches the pinnacle of intellectual achievement, gets the royal seal of approval, but still, it seems like he remained a pretty private and solitary guy.
Very much so. Never married, no known romantic relationships. His world was his work, his relentless pursuit of knowledge.
It's like he was on this constant quest, driven by this insatiable need to, understand, to peel back the layers of reality. And even with all his success, he still had this, incredible sense of humility.
That's what gets me. There's this famous quote where he says, "I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then, finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me."
Wow, this giant of science comparing himself to a child playing on the beach. It's like he's acknowledging that no matter how much we learn, there's always, infinitely more out there. It's humbling,
Absolutely. And that's his enduring legacy.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't just give us answers, he gave us questions. Inspired generations of scientists to keep exploring, to keep pushing those boundaries of human understanding.
And his impact is still felt today. I mean, we're talking about the guy who laid the foundation for modern physics, astronomy, engineering.
Think about it. Newton's laws govern the trajectory of rockets launching into space, the stability of bridges spanning vast rivers, even the tiny circuits in our smartphones.
It's like his mind is still working, shaping the world around us, even centuries after his death. And speaking of his death, he was buried in Westminster Abbey, right? Among kings and queens.
He was. A state funeral, a testament to his profound impact. His tomb bears the inscription, "Here lies what was mortal of Isaac Newton." But his ideas, his relentless pursuit of understanding, those are immortal.
Okay, so we've covered Newton's life, his work, his quarks. But what does it all mean for us? What can we, the non-geniuses of the world, take away from this extraordinary story?
Well, I think one key takeaway is the power of relentless curiosity. Newton's need to understand how things worked, to ask why again and again, that's what drove his groundbreaking discoveries. So never lose that childlike wonder, that thirst for knowledge.
And maybe a little bit of that stubbornness he was known for wouldn't hurt either. This guy faced skepticism, rivalry, personal demons, but he never gave up on his pursuit of truth.
Right. There's a lesson in resilience there. Newton's life shows us that challenges and setbacks are inevitable, but it's our passion, our dedication to our goals that allows us to overcome them.
So even if we don't all have Newton's genius, we can all embrace that spirit of inquiry, that drive to keep learning and growing.
Absolutely. And that's what makes exploring these great minds so rewarding. We see not only their brilliance, but also their humanity, their struggles, their triumphs. It reminds us that greatness is within reach for all of us, in our own unique ways.
All right, folks, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Isaac Newton. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought.
Okay.
We've talked about Newton's laws, his groundbreaking discoveries, the impact he had on science and the world. But what about the man himself?
Right.
This solitary genius driven by this almost like obsessive need to understand the universe. Was it nature or nurture?
Yeah.
Did his difficult childhood shape his personality, his drive for perfection? Did his intense focus come at a cost to his personal life, his relationships?
These are the questions that linger, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's tempting to put figures like Newton on a pedestal, to see them as these flawless icons of intellect. But his story is, I think, a powerful reminder that behind every great mind, there's a human being.
Yeah.
With all their complexities and contradictions.
It makes you wonder, right? Would he have been even more productive if he'd been a little less fixated on being right?
Yeah.
A little more open to collaboration? Or did that stubbornness, that drive to prove himself, did that fuel his breakthroughs?
Yeah. It's impossible to know for sure, but it's so fascinating to consider.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of exploring these historical figures, right?
Wow.
We gain insights not just into their achievements, but also into the human condition itself.
So, as we go about our day, surrounded by the technology and advancements that Newton's work made possible, it's worth taking a moment to, appreciate the man behind the science, to remember that these universal laws weren't just handed down from on high. They were discovered by a flesh and blood person who wrestled with, I think, the same questions we all grapple with.
Yeah.
What is our place in the universe? How do we make sense of the world around us?
Exactly, and that sense of wonder, that drive to seek understanding, those are qualities that we can all cultivate within ourselves.
Yeah.
Newton's legacy isn't just about equations and theories. It's about the power of human curiosity, the enduring drive to explore and discover.
So next time you see an apple fall, or gaze up at the stars, or even just, use your smartphone, take a moment to think about that incredible mind that helped make it all possible. And maybe, just maybe, let that spark a little curiosity within you. Who knows what mysteries you might unravel. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.